Hello, friends, and welcome to Bible study. We are in the NIV and chapter 4, Ephesians chapter 4. I should probably tell you what book. Ephesians chapter 4. We're doing 17 through 32. That's really just the rest of chapter 4. It starts a parable, which will go on into chapter 5, where it says the parable is called Living as the Children of Light. So I had some very interesting thoughts. This is a letter from the Apostle Paul to the city in Ephesus. Now, I want to be very clear here. When he's talking about the Gentiles in this letter, he's being specific as to a group of people where Ephesus is. It's actually over by Turkey, but he's talking sort of about like it's a Roman city and it's a metropolitan. So you got 3 days in a row, metropolitan melting pot. So you got Romans, right? But you also got people from every walks of life. You got Celts, so you got Gauls, you got French people, Irish people, Scottish people, English people, melting pot. People we like to think of the ancient world like we were all isolated and we didn't know intermixing. That's BS. That's what genetics and everybody, like me putting their DNA everywhere is showing you. No, you're actually probably multiracial. I'm multiracial. And it gets a little bit more obvious if one is actually paying attention. Living as children of light. So I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do. You're a Christian, not a Gentile. It's a cultural lifestyle change kind of thing, sort of like eating healthy as opposed to being on a diet, right? So it's for him it's very much one in the same. In the futility of their thinking. So he doesn't even want you to think like they do. So I tell you this, and I insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of their ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. When people are so certain that they are correct that they will no longer listen to anybody else at all, you're in an echo chamber and you're stuck in confirmation bias, if you want to use more modern day terms, you're not going to soften their heart. That's a conscious choice each individual has to make. Having lost all sensitivity, he's really talking about Romans here. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. Now, this is something I have said. You can on a bunch of things, a bunch of different channels, but I think it's on Stars. Pretty sure it's Stars. There is Spartacus. Now, they start getting into untruths when you get into the second season, but they keep the historical facts as far as a certain level. Like, they didn't burn down that Colosseum. That's my problem right there. They never burned down that Colosseum. Was there eventually something that happened to it? Yes, but it didn't happen in that point in history when they show it that way. It was just very good for the dramatics. But the rest of it, pretty much accurate, because I backcheck most of it. But you will see what he's talking about there. And I know it's but that time period in history in which they are talking about, that Spartacus took place in the time of Joseph's father. So the time of Jesus's step-grandpa. So understand that means Joseph grew up in that time frame. And this would have been the level of humanity in the world that Paul is commenting on, because this is 50, 60 years after the death of Jesus. So we're only talking about 200 years later. So think about it like the difference between now and when our country started. And do you see where they were at when their country started? Well, when Christianity started anyway, because their country had been around a really long time. If you had seen where they were at when, skinning people alive is a party game. Okay? That's where they were at. You, however, did not come to know Christ that way. You didn't come to know Christ by engaging in the lustful, sinful ways of the world. That's not what he was preaching. Surely you heard of him and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with the regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, to change how you think and interact with the world. You're supposed to be cultivating your immaculate heart. And most of the ways of the world that he's talking about here is denying the humanity of another. And if you feel you have the right to disrespect somebody because of some body demographic, when we're talking about energy and soul, so none of your demographics in your flesh matter at all. There are no isms in heaven. It does not exist there. It's the pure love vibration. So it can't exist there. Your hatred, my hatred, anybody's bias, all of it. Because people have any kinds of those things going on. And I'm not claiming I'm perfect or I've never felt any of those emotions. That would be all a lie. I'm not even trying to claim those things. What I'm saying is even in myself, it's a thing I would have to heal wherever it exists and wherever it crops up that I didn't even know it existed before. It doesn't matter. I still have to heal it. We all have to heal it. Because there are no isms in heaven. And when we want to show him love, that we understand what he's trying to teach us, we are actively seeking to shed it. It's not that we're going to be perfect. It's that we try. But if we're not even trying and we're looking for the loophole, then you're not trying. And to put on a new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. That's like the "what would Jesus do" movement. He said love one another. So let's love one another. That has implications. There are things that means is unacceptable. You need to think about that for a second. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor. For we are all members of one body. Verse 26. In your anger, do not sin. That's Psalm 4:4. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. It's not that you can't have emotions. You're going to have emotions. It's about how you communicate the emotions you have. Doing it in a respectful way. And do not give the devil a foothold. If you start thinking you're better than anybody, the devil's already got a foothold. That's sort of how it works. Verse 28. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his own hands. You don't get rich off of other people's labors. Really. And I know that's but the business world. I know. But he's talking about your soul. And he's also telling business people not to be that way. They're supposed to be paying a livable wage so that their employees can survive and thrive in this world without struggle. And if they're not doing that, then they're perhaps not a very good place to work. Okay? That he may have something to share with those in need. Hospitality was a given within the Jewish culture. You were meant to do it because if you didn't do it, you could be responsible for letting people be outside when those raving bands of rapists, because there were no cops or anything, were roaming around raping people. So if you're like, when did we become a rape culture? Mofo, we have always been a rape culture all the way back in the biblical days. It's in there all over the place. All over. Because what God was fighting with was incubus, succubus energy. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. Baal and Ashtar were all about that. Go forth and multiply. And they didn't care about consent. We have a struggle getting people to care about consent today. We're still arguing about what consent even means. If we haven't figured it out now, what makes you think any of our ancestors had any better idea if it's not even clear to us today? I mean, that's why with the people, I can't understand people who could possibly conceive of the idea that they could have, no, I can't possibly have any crappy ancestors. What? You are delusional, and you need to go take a better look. Unless you treat every person perfectly, like as if they are your equal in every way, shape, or form, while still holding your integrity, while doing, like, I mean, there's so many ways. If you have any emotional triggers, and you're still in a vessel like the rest of us, then you don't have it all figured out. And you haven't even begun to have it all figured out. If you're not letting him lead your every day, then you're already off track, in my opinion. It's a good thing my opinion is not what gets you in or out of heaven. And it's a good thing for me that your opinion is not what gets me in or out of heaven. You don't have any control over that, neither do I. 20 verse 29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. Let me make that very clear. What does that mean? It means no gossip, no speaking negatively about people, no attacking, no insults, no tit for tat, none of that. All of that is completely unacceptable if you are a Christian, because you show Christ that you follow him with the love one another. Constructive criticism helps a person grow. It can't be done with malice in your heart. If you want to put that person in their place, then you're not coming from the right intention of heart. And what you're doing is showing your wounding, and you need to go heal. Because if you feel you can't learn something from every single living being, I mean, even the insect, the blade of grass, and the drop of water, if you think you have nothing to learn from them, in my opinion, you're already off base. And I suggest you readjust. It's for building each other's up, that it may benefit those who listen. And Paul's words directly. Verse 30. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God. If you're mad that you can't insult people now, you need to call the Holy Spirit into you. You've got some more healing to do. You're not supposed to want to insult people. With whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. The Holy Spirit being in you is how you get to be redeemable. It's part of how you heal. I call the Holy Spirit into me like all the time, all day long, off and on. Every time I feel like I need anything. Get rid of all bitterness. Daily struggle when I encounter certain people. That's why I started, calling people, so the bitterness wouldn't stay in me, so I could go heal it. Because you can't heal from a trauma while you're going through it. And the feeling of bitterness is an indication that you have trauma. Unresolved trauma. Rage and anger. So losing your temper. Actively losing your temper, and when you don't get your way, things like that. Going into fits of rage. Unhealedness. Brawling. So fist fights. No fist fights. And slander. No gossip. No lies. Along with every other form of malice. So, I'm not just making this stuff up myself. This is also coming from the Apostle Paul. Be kind and compassionate to one another. Compassion is the most basic form of love that we can display. It is a mandatory thing, in my opinion. I don't know how you follow the commandment, love one another, if you don't have compassion for your fellow man. If you seek to dehumanize them, then you're already off track, and you should go heal. Go talk to a counselor or something. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you. I don't think I can end it any better than that. That's a beautiful plea. It's the same plea I give you every day. So, Soul Tribe, Spirit Team, let's go about the world and be the best version of us that we can be today, understanding that it's the Immaculate Heart. It's the Immaculate Heart, and showing compassion and grace for each other, just as we were shown compassion and grace by Jesus, that we are supposed to be emulating.